Anatomy of an invoice. In this lesson, we will be addressing Standard 1 Resources, Benchmark 1, Students Prepare and Analyze Personal or Business Financial Information. And to do this, we will be looking at a business invoice and what it is. So, to start with, what is an invoice? An invoice is a bill or commercial document issued by a seller to the buyer indicating the products, quantities, and agreed prices for products or services the seller has provided the buyer. An invoice indicates the buyer must pay the seller according to the payment terms. The buyer has a maximum amount of days to pay these goods and are sometimes offered a discount if paid before. In simple terms, an invoice is a bill. So let's go ahead and take a look at what an invoice a freelance artist might provide to a client. Most invoices come on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and leave a little bit of space at the bottom for additional notes. The essentials of an invoice are your business or just your name, your address or your business's address, the word invoice, the client information, an invoice date, an invoice number, and customer ID, a description of the services provided and the rates charged, a total amount due, additional comments, and finally payment information. So let's go ahead and take a look at each one of these items a little bit closer. At this point, if you want to follow along and fill out your own invoice, you can log onto your Sharp School Classroom, go to the Files tab, and go ahead and download Invoice Template to your computer. Open that up in Word. You can use this invoice template to follow along and fill out each of the parts as we go through step by step. Alright, so let's start with your business name or your organization's name, or if you don't have a business or organization or just a freelance artist, this would be your name. So go ahead and type in your name or your hypothetical business name here. Once we're completed with that, we'll move over to your address or your business's address. In most cases, this is a mailing address, so go ahead and fill in a P.O. Box number, since this is Jackson, Wyoming. Add your phone number, your fax number, your email address, and a web address if you happen to have a website. Moving on, make sure that your invoice actually has the word invoice on it. This is essential so that when a client receives this piece of paper in the mail, they know exactly what it is and they won't just file it in some box that disappears forever and ever and you won't get paid. Moving on to number 4, the client information. So this is the name of the client or business that you did work for or provided a service for, their mailing address, city, state, postal code. Also include their phone number. You can include a fax number here, and also their email address. Go ahead and fill all of that information out. Moving on, we have the invoice date, the invoice number, and an optional customer ID. These fields are pretty much organizational tools on an invoice. The invoice date helps you as a service provider keep a record of when you provided services. And by indicating an invoice number, you can keep track of how much work that you've done over time. As a freelance service provider, most of the time you won't have consistent invoices to one client. You'll have a lot of random invoices to a number of clients. So the best way to go about this is just to start with invoice number 001 and rattle on from there, 002, 003, as you do work for different clients. And again, your customer ID, this is optional in case you want to keep track of your customers via some special code. Now we move on to the meat of the invoice, the description of service and the rate charged for said service. So let's take a look at what a description might look like. Since this is an invoice for video production, we'll go ahead and type in videography. Well, how much do you charge for videography? As it happens, we worked for 16 hours and we charged a rate of $35 an hour for a grand total of $560. So that's an example of labor. What if we were just charging for an item, say camera rental? What would that look like? Well, we can type in camera rental. Let's say for this particular project we had to rent a high definition camera for 2 days at $300 per day. So we would pass along a charge of $600 to our client. So those are two examples of different types of service descriptions or equipment descriptions. Quantity, a quantity could be the number of hours that you worked, or it could be days, or it could be, for example, the type of media. Let's say you produce 5 DVDs. You could put number 5 in there for DVDs and charge $5 per DVD, etc., etc. So moving on, we go to the subtotal, tax, shipping, miscellaneous, and total amount due box. In these fields, you round up a subtotal. So with our $560 of videography and our $600 camera rental, our subtotal came to $1,160. We aren't charging any tax. We didn't have any shipping, and there were no miscellaneous charges, so our final total due was also $1,160. In the comments box, this is a great place to let the client know how long they have to pay, and also that they should include the invoice number on the check. You can include any other types of comments that you think would be helpful for your client. The final thing that you need to fill out on your invoice is payment information. And this may be the most important part of the invoice because this lets your client know who they write the check to. So go ahead and fill in an organization name or your name. Indicate who you want your client to write a check to. Is it your business or is it you? Hopefully you were able to follow along and fill in all of the information on your invoice. And now it's time for the 3-second test. What is the 3-second test? Well, the 3-second test refers to a client being able to look at your invoice and circle 3 things in 3 seconds: the date, the invoice number, and the total amount due. Go ahead and check out your invoice and see if you are able to do just that. So in conclusion, why use an invoice? Well, it helps you keep a record of services provided. It also allows the client to keep a record of services provided. It encourages prompt reimbursement for work that you have done for a client. And it allows you to create accurate estimates for future projects or work. So those are the basics of creating a business invoice.